This is the Amy Edwards Show, and I'm your host, Amy. This show is here to help all of us live our best life and feel amazing at absolutely every age. We focus on transformation and empowerment through practical tools, strategies, habits, and mindset shifts that will help you unlock your potential, build self-love, and embrace your unique journey. We'll cover everything from health and wellness to personal growth and spirituality with inspiring guests and real conversations. So if you're ready to level up, break out of your comfort zone, and make lasting changes, you're in the right place. It's never too late. In fact, some of your best days haven't even happened yet. Let's get to it. Love this moment and make the next one even shinier. Hello, and welcome to the Amy Edwards Show. I'm your host, Amy Edwards, and are you ready to get your pivot on today? I think pivoting, or whatever you want to call it, is such an important part of life. I've done it myself more times than I can count. And we're going to talk with an expert today. In fact, that is her middle name. So join me in welcoming Sarah, the pivoter, Kalmeta. And Sarah is all about change and making that change and guides people in doing so in her keynote speeches and more. So Sarah, welcome to the show. I am so happy to talk pivoting with you today because I am a huge fan of the pivot. So I can't wait to hear what you have to tell me about that today. Welcome.
Thank you, Amy. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. We've been trying to make this happen for a while. We're in the same town, but we're doing it remote. But who cares?
Making it. We pivoted a few times.
We're making it happen. You are so striking. And when I first saw you, you just have a glow that comes across, and you seem just like you have it together. And I was like, who is she? I want to seem like I have it together. And I think it's that confidence that comes from knowing that you're okay no matter what. And so I want you to talk about what pivoting means to you, because I think it can mean transformation, it can mean change and all these things. So let's just dive in first with how you define that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Firstly, thank you for that reflection.
You're welcome.
It's something that definitely comes from that like self-assurance. And I've been on this really big cycle and journey of radical self-acceptance. And that has a large part to do with the art of the pivot, as I like to call it. When people think about the word pivot, they think about, changing direction and change and, as you said, transformation. But the art of the pivot can be a lot more subtle also. There's nuance there, there's levels, there's layers. And so for me, it's really this invitation to play with reality and to play what life is bringing to you and seeing what feels good. And then from there, making a decision, knowing that even if you don't have a plan of attack or a strategy or a tactic, you're going to figure it out because you have those skills. And the whole point of life is to figure out what feels good and what doesn't feel good, and then go in the direction of what serves you best, right? So when we're in the pivot, we can sometimes be too rigid on the plan. And, we go down this track and then we get there and we're like, what is this? I don't like this at all. But you weren't paying attention. You weren't present enough for that process. So for me, the pivot is really every moment. It's every breath you take, you have a chance to pivot. And being really present is what allows you to become that artist with the paintbrush that's, painting instead of, paint by numbers or, not able to put anything on the paper because, you're locked in fear or splashing everything all at once and then nothing coherent is coming out. So it's really just this moment to moment ultra presence that allows you to confidently take that step forward, no matter what direction that's in.
Oh, I think that's such a beautiful word, self-assurance. And I don't use that near enough. I love it. I want to talk more about that. And I think it's very interesting that those two are tied up. But I want to first talk about, I think that we're like brainwashed from the time that we're born. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And giving way too much credit to having it all figured out. when if we're really present, we're able to go where we're guided with that self-assurance. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. I would 100% agree with you. We're brainwashed to think that we're not enough unless XYZ, right? I mean, like Maybelline's slogan, right? Maybe she's born with it, or maybe it's Maybelline, right? So it's everywhere. It's in commercialism. It's in, it's programming from our parents, from society, different generations. And, it's this false narrative that like once you get to the destination, you're done and you've got it figured out and it's over. And that's actually how people start to fail, right? Think about early on in the career, people are really working hard to figure things out. And they're curious and they're trying new things and they're showing up, they're putting in effort. And then they become a manager and they're like, made it. Now I can just post to like dictate to everybody else. Those are the people who crash and burn and fail because they stop learning. They stop getting curious about what's happening and they cling to this result, but everything is changing all the time. And so you have to, it's a dance, right? We have to be fluid. We have to be able to move. And, when you first made the comment about, you seem like you had it all together, there was a part of me who wanted to laugh because like, I definitely don't.
Right.
But
I can relate.
In the moment of, well, especially when we met, but just when you're ultra present, you're in this environment of like, I don't really know what's happening here, but I'm here for it. And I'm going to figure it out. And being curious and being engaged and present, that's what allows you to give off this. That's when people are glowing, right? Because they're in a flow state. They're just being with the now rather than like, what's going to happen in 5 minutes? Or, oh shit, I did this thing 5 minutes ago and God, that was dumb, right? And we have this.
Yeah. Or even trying to control what's going on right now, right? Like
yes.
that stress of like, what people look like when they're trying to control the moment, and you're just like,
there's like tension.
Yeah, there's tension.
Exactly. There's tension in the body. And it's really interesting because we are animals, right? And we pick up on those clues, those senses, and then the brain catches up and puts words around it, right? So the more relaxed you are, the more you're taking care of yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, then the less you have to like overcome. So rigidity is where things break. When we're supple, when we can bend, that wind could be blowing at 100 kilometers per hour, 100 miles per hour. But because you can bend, you can go back up when the wind's over. But if you were a straight rod, it would just snap. It would break. And so for me, it's, the overcoming that narrative is definitely a journey. And it probably, sometimes you think you've kind of worked through it and it comes through in a different disguise, a more sneaky form, right? And you're like, yeah, I'm not a perfectionist anymore. Like, see that mug? Left that mug there for 10 days and I didn't say anything to my partner. Like, look at how much I've grown, right? But then something else will come in and you're like, oh yeah, it's snuck in a different form. It's wearing a different disguise. And so just, also laughing at yourself. I think that's part of the process. When I couldn't laugh at myself, that's when I'd get embarrassed and hot and frustrated and like, oh my God, what are they going to think of me? And as long as you're living in alignment with your values, then it doesn't matter what other people think of you because you're like, fine, you don't agree with me? Okay, you're over there. But if you're out of alignment, then that's when that incongruence internally becomes more of the issue. So yeah, laughing at yourself is part of the unwinding and unlearning. And then just, making a game of it, I think is the best way, right? When we learn how to play again, I think that's when we can overcome a lot of this with a lot less stress.
I agree. I talk about that a lot on the show because whatever we're learning or talking about, I'm like, it doesn't have to be forever. Just treat it as an experiment is what I always call it. I'm like, just experiment with it. Try it for 2 weeks or a month. Nothing has to be a lifelong commitment. Let's talk about your own pivots and how you got to this point of preaching the pivot, let's say.
I'm a big fan of alliteration. So
I mean, P is a good word. A good letter. It's got punch. So
Exactly.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And when we enunciate, we can really use the sounds of words as a speaker, right? It's
Yeah.
the
Did
sound
you
of
know did you know there's like certain letters that you can use words that certain words that begin with certain letters that are funnier than others? There's like an actual science to it.
yeah. And there's even just things that are more like succinct and
Yeah.
direct, and
Yeah.
there's a finality to it,
Mm-hmm.
And that's also with the intonation and how we speak and everything. It's funny. That just reminded me of, I was out and my dog barked, and we were at this restaurant. She normally doesn't bark. And she got up and she did this bark, and literally 6 people I was with, they all looked at me and they're like, "Oh, I guess you're leaving now." And it was like, we all understood the message. The message was like
It's
very
time to
final.
go.
I'm done. We're leaving. And that wasn't even English, right?
Yeah.
So and the same thing happens when you travel. You can go somewhere to another country and not know what they're saying, but you pick up on the energy of it without even noticing if they're smiling or laughing, or just, hearing. You'll sense, oh, that's a joyful space, or oh, that's a mournful space. That's a, I don't want to go over there space, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the pivots. So how did I get here? I think I've always had a very healthy appetite for adventure, maybe a little reckless abandon when it comes to what perhaps I maybe should fear, right? But I just do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so
That sounds a little like a natural predisposition to the pivot. Is
yes,
that? Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Good.
So
That's good.
I've always been more open to that. And I think a lot of that had to do with growing up as first generation American, in a multicultural home, being exposed to travel from a young age and different perspectives and mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
And, my first dream was to be an Olympic gold medalist in figure skating. So that was my whole life. I was at the ice rink from 5 a.m. and then till 8, go to school, and then back after school. The summer I was there the whole time. And I did that for 11 years. And I had sustained pretty difficult injuries that led to a very mature conversation when I was 14 of, at what cost to your body are you willing to continue down this path? Because we'll support you, but you're 14. And if you have another major fall, you'll need double knee surgery.
Oh my! At 14, wow.
Right. And so, and what, truth be told too, I had some coaches that, were using negative reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
I started to lose my love of the sport, and it shifted, right? Especially puberty time, and everything is so intense. And I pivoted at that point to aviation and aerospace. That was always something I was fascinated by. My first 2 words were for star and airplane. So I started doing civil air patrol in high school, and I went to an aeronautical university, worked in business aviation I've been in aviation 20 years now, business aviation, the private jet industry, 17 years. And I started really diving into aerospace more strongly once I was back in the United States a couple of years ago. I lived in Asia for 13 years. And that was literally me going with a suitcase for a 2-month trip, and turned into 13 years. Me pivoting back to the United States was me coming for a 2-month holiday that turned into now 3 years, right? So it's just been like, hey, I'm going to go on this adventure and see what happens. And I started to notice that there was a bit of a pattern to that. And, what other people were telling me was so brave or courageous, or like, wow, I could never do that. I was like, what are you talking about? Of course you could. But I didn't realize that was my superpower, and that maybe wasn't everybody's predisposition or natural ability. And so I started to really look at, what was I harnessing that was a skill set that I had maybe from a young age, or a tendency, or personality trait, and what were the things that I learned along the way, and started to, find not a strict formula, but patterns and ways of being that really contributed to success in those types of environments. I certainly attribute a lot of it to working in dispatch and operations in the private jet industry.
Hmm.
Because in the United States, at least, you can file a flight plan and take off in 1 hour. So you can change midair. You could change multiple times. Once you start going international, especially with different countries, maybe the permits take 1 or 2 days to get. So it's a little bit less intense when it comes to a change. But you could literally spend all night doing all this work to get an aircraft set up for this flight with 10 legs and wake up in the morning and it's all different and you have to do it all over again. And so that's a very stressful environment to operate in. And you are literally poised at any moment for something to be thrown your way, to catch it and handle it and throw it back. Right. So I definitely think that trained me a little bit of PTSD also. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm sure. That's so funny. Justin and I were just
Definitely.
talking about the most stressful jobs, and I said I thought it was like air traffic control. It was like aviation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but we weren't sure why exactly. But that is so interesting. Wow.
Yes, I mean, that constant change, you're
Mhm.
anticipating it. And then very often too in that world, while it's luxurious on the outside, internally the way things are run, it's not the same, right? And so the company might be operating aircraft all over the world 24/7, but the team is smaller and so they have rotating staff on call. So, I'd be asleep, my phone would make a sound and I'd be like instantly awake because it was like, this aircraft's in London, I got to dispatch it. They're probably calling for a new fuel release because they changed the time. And so you'd be instantly awake. It took me 9 years, I'm not even joking, 9 years to decondition myself from the sound of a phone at night. And to this day, I still sleep with earplugs and my phone in the other room
Wow.
because I don't even want, also, it's not healthy to have your phone next to your bed. That's a whole nother story.
I
But
know. I do
um,
though.
I
Whatever.
know,
I'm
yeah.
sure tons of people listening do. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the greatest things I've ever done for myself was put my phone in the other room to charge and not touch it for the first 30 minutes upon waking.
I'm worried about my kids. I can't right now. I don't, and in fact, I don't know when I ever will be because of like, what if my kids need something? Like, it's not the
Yeah.
days of landlines. Like then you ring,
Right.
So yeah. Anyway, sorry, tangent. Okay. So, but I get it. Like that's wild. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, that was definitely like training to the nth degree that just prepared me for that. But another thing that I noticed was, so when I started Pivot Point, and I started in 2020, and I was living in Hong Kong at the time, and leading up to, I started the concept in April, launched in the summer. But, January till May of that year, obviously it was COVID time and I was in Asia. So, well, the rest of the world was like, oh, it's over there. It's fine. It's not good. It's going to go away. It won't get here. That didn't happen. Right.
Mm-mm.
So, I'm looking around. I'm also running the P&L at this point. Like I see at the end of January, we're already 90% down year on year. Then in February, 98% down year on year. I was like, my role's not going to, I'm in charge of opening up new offices and locations and all borders are closed and no aircraft are flying. They've all gone to America or Europe to try to escape this. And at that point, I was working for the company that sold services to flying aircraft. So we were at the end of the food chain, if you will. There was no management to be collected, no recurring revenue. So you didn't fly, we didn't make any money. So I started making plans because in 2008, I lost my role due to the global financial crisis. So I had that happen at 19. I remember I was devastated, or at 20. And my mentor said, this is the best thing that could have ever happened to you because you're so young, you're so resilient, and now you know what it feels like to have to pivot and change and do something different and start all over. And some people don't ever experience that, or they experience it when they're 50 and they're 30 years into something.
Yeah. Did they use the word pivot?
You know what? Probably not. I think I backward projected that. I'm pretty sure he said
it works for the story. Okay. We're going to go with pivot.
It does.
Okay.
We're going to go with it. He planted this seed. Maybe that's where it came from.
Yeah.
I don't know. And so in 2008, I started thinking, okay, well, I'm already disillusioned. I was burnt out at that point and I was golden handcuffs. I was stuck in this cycle of literally spending insane amounts of money, several $1,000s a month on mental health, this acupuncture, Reiki, massage. I'm going to buy everyone dinner because I want to feel good about myself, or like I'm going to book another holiday to escape the craziness of Hong Kong. And then at the end of the month, look at my runway and go, oh yeah, okay, I can't quit yet. Like I need to save up. But it just this repeated for about 9 months. So when COVID happened, I started thinking, okay, seriously, what do I actually want to do with myself? Like, I don't even know. So I started that whole process, looking at these numbers declining, thinking, oh, I might lose my role here anytime soon. And all my friends, everybody's like, oh, how could that happen? Like, you just won an award as Trailblazer of the Year. Your company loves you, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, none of that means anything if they're not making money. Like, this is a business transaction relationship. Like, they can love me all they want. They still won't keep me employed, right? And
that's a real good thing to know, because I think a lot of people, it takes a slap in the face to realize that. You know what I mean? Takes it actually happening. Yeah,
actually, and it's not personal. It's just you are literally in that. It is a transactional relationship because you are exchanging services for money, right? So they couldn't accept this reality. And then finally, when I got the call in mid-March that my role would be ending in a couple of months, everyone was like, oh yeah, but you work in aviation, and aviation's really hard right now, especially in Hong Kong. Like, it makes sense. Month later, real estate lost their job. Month later, construction. Next week, banking. Next week, the gym. Next week, this. And everyone was like in shock.
Yeah.
I didn't see it
unbelievable.
Right. Yeah. How could this happen? Where did this come from? I can't believe it. And I was like, I can, right? Yeah. So, I had that experience, but I also had started to really kind of see through the veil, as I like to call it, of the stories we tell ourselves. And I still tell myself stories. We're human. We're story-making machines, like trying to make meaning out of everything. But this made me realize, like, okay, I have the ability to help bridge this gap. I've been through it before. I have this unique ability to be the bridge between worlds. One of my superpowers is translating between cultures, between departments, between people. And I started to just share, what I was experiencing. And for me, it was a large part of my journey at that time, also unwinding this identity I had built for myself as this young expat woman in Asia in an executive position, right? And like, that was me. That was my identity. Who was I if I didn't have this? So I had to figure something out. And I thought about, well, what did I do after figure skating? And what did I do when I first moved to Asia? And and started like putting together my own resilience list of what had I been through before, what helped me then, and what's going to help me now. And started working with a lot of flight crew, a lot of pilots in particular. They identify with their job. They're not someone who flies an airplane. They are pilots. And so when they started to lose their jobs, they really were lost. And like, what do I do with myself? And how do I transfer these skill sets? And so that's what got Pivot Point started. That's what, where I came up with this concept of, like, at any moment, things could change. And they can, you could get hit by a car tomorrow and not be able to walk, right? Or not be here. And everything can change in a split second. But we don't really acknowledge that because we're going fast and because we don't want to admit it. But in that journey of actually, memento mori, like really being with that as a possibility, then you start to get more real about, well, I may not have tomorrow or someday, one day. Like, what can I do today instead?
Absolutely. And I like that you brought up identity. That's a big part of, you mentioned the nuance too, which I want to get to, but that's part of the fear around pivoting, I think, so much too, is that this is my identity. I've established this, am I letting go of that? And there's just all these question marks. What tools do you advise people to use when they're entertaining this anyway, or starting to, make some changes?
Yeah, no, this is great question. And I really like this one. So I did an exercise with a mentor of mine in Hong Kong with this process. And he sat me down, and he took the pen and pencil in his hand, and he just asked me to like think, and he wrote everything down. But what you can do is do I am, I do.
Okay. What does that mean?
So anything that pops up into your head. So I am a daughter. I am a sister. I am a business owner. I am a yogi, right? Any label that you have for yourself. What do I do? I speak, I run workshops, I run, any verb, any action that you do, whether you get paid for it or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just write down all of these things that come to you. All your attributes. I am stubborn. I am smart. I do outdoor activities, anything that you can come up with. Just start writing it down. I actually still to this day from that exercise have a running tab on my notepad on my iCloud that I just continually add to. Anytime I write a description for a podcast, anytime I have to describe myself in a new way, I put it in there and I can go back and I can look at the evolution of who I am and what I do since I started this process. And that also then sometimes I circle back around. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of back to where I was 2 years ago, but the wording is slightly different. It's maybe a level higher or a level, maybe a step to the right, a step back, and it's more broad rather than more narrow. And then that also gives me another perspective of, oh yeah, that did feel pretty good. Maybe I should try that again. Or I like how I said that before. What can I do now with the language I use and how I present now that feels really good? And so that is an exercise I encourage people to do regularly, not just when you're going through a change. Make it part of your regular review process. I have a monthly check-in and a weekly check-in also, but just the more you constantly look at these pivot points, the easier it becomes to gain clarity and make a decision without having gone down so far a road that you're like, well, I've already spent this much money or this much time or this many years. And it's more, I'm more stuck in now, and it feels more difficult to get out of it.
Why is that useful though? Because it seems like you would want to, I guess it's expanding your view of yourself rather than letting go of the identity that you've had in order to open up to something different. Because I was thinking you would want to maybe, I don't know, just let those things go. I think I'm coming from a place where I have had instances where I felt like a lot of women over-identified with being a mom and wife and these things. And I was like, no, you're a whole person without any of that. And so,
so that's
what does making that list provide exactly? That's what I want to know.
So doing that exercise with someone else, whether it's a coach, a mentor, your boss, your partner, your child, whomever, you do it with someone else is way more powerful because they're going to reflect back to you. So I do this exercise on my own, and I also will do it with someone else because when I did it with my mentor, he brought up words that I didn't use. Like, for example, he was like, "You're smart." I hadn't even called myself smart. And yet I know that I am, right? I had gotten straight A's. I'm intelligent. I figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't use that to describe myself. For whatever reason, I had a hang up about calling myself smart. But when he did it for me, at that time, I remember being uncomfortable and being like, yeah, I am. And he's like, own it. You are. You don't have to be embarrassed about it. And he taught me how to see myself in a different way. And he showed me what he saw in me. So doing this exercise on your own is the first step. So, and you keep it running, like whether you do it in a notebook or on a computer, this is a running tab. Anytime something sparks and you're cooking, you're like, oh, I cook. I'm a chef, like whatever the label that comes in, and you just start writing this down, because when you first sit down, you might be very singular. You might go all into the mom stuff, all into the athletic stuff, and have nothing to do with anything business or intellectual or physical outside of sport. And then all of a sudden you're doing something, you're like, oh, I also do this. I'm also this. Or someone calls you something. I'm like, hey, you're really creative. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm creative. And you add that to the list. Mm-hmm. So it's an invitation to where your attention goes, energy flows. If you are putting your attention on this exercise, you're bringing it to the table when you go to your business meetings, your circles, right? Your masterminds. If you're doing it with a coach, if you're doing it with your spiritual group, whatever communities you play in, you'll start to go, oh, wow, look at how many different facets of me there are actually. It's not just this one. And so that's why it's It's really powerful to do, but it's not like a one and done exercise by any means.
No, and I think that it is training yourself to open up to, oh, wait, I have a lot more to me than I thought. And then you are subconsciously more available to any type of pivot, right?
Exactly. Correct. And that's what you want, because when we get so prescriptive in the story we have on what constitutes success based on outcome, like when I have this or when I get this, then I will be successful, right? If X, then Y, you will always be chasing that. A goalpost always moves, right? And in the high, you need like greater and greater highs in order for it to feel like something. And this is often why people who are very successful were like, how could they get that DUI, or how could they do this? They threw their life away. It's because they're chasing the high, and they need that to feel something, because otherwise they feel like not good enough, because they're operating from a place of not liking where they are. So they're constantly chasing. But if you can like where you are now, and you're, like, say, if, for example, for earlier part of the year, I defined myself as a keynote speaker. So if I wasn't keynote speaking, I felt like I wasn't successful. But that's not all I do. I do a lot of other things. And so, now in my mind, it's like, yes, I'm a speaker. I'm also a host. I'm also a producer. I'm also, an athlete. I'm also a poet.
You're yes-anding yourself,
Yes,
like
exactly.
yes,
exactly. And that's what this opportunity, this invitation to this exercise gives you. And so as I opened up my own mindset this year on that, I became all of a sudden aware of like, hey, that actually sounds pretty cool. And then that person became aware of me with the interest, going, oh my God, you'd be perfect for this. Do you want to do it? And it was like, yeah, why not? And then I did it, and it's like, wow, that was actually really fun. Like, I got to combine a few skill sets here. And like, yeah, actually, I want to do more of this. So then that leads to more opportunity. So that, just taking away the one label of I'm a pilot, or I'm a mom, or I'm a banker, and looking at all of this list of labels, now all of a sudden you're like attuned to those words. And when they come up, an opportunity or in conversation, you go, you know what? I didn't used to think I was creative, but man, like I bake and I cook I make these amazing cakes. All the moms want me to do the cakes for the kids' birthday parties. I actually am pretty creative. And then someone's like, oh my God, we have this thing and we need someone. Can you do that? Right. And you're like, oh yeah, I don't know how to do, I've never done that before, but I certainly know how to do XYZ. Like, I'll help you out. And then that's how you create the opportunity for yourself, rather than waiting for like I need to fit in that box type of opportunity.
This podcast is sponsored by Wands. Wands creates luxurious pleasure practice tools that help people become more connected to their bodies. They have a huge selection of incredible items like yoni eggs, the most gorgeous crystal pleasure wands you've ever seen, free bleed blankets, and my favorites, the trademarked glass cervix wand and the Venus wand, which is their heaviest wand made of stainless steel, and their new ecstatic vibrator. This company is woman-owned and creates products designed to help you become more connected to your body and your pleasure and support the healing of pelvic pain. Get yours today in their always discreet packaging at wands.com. That's Wands with 2 A's, WAANDS.com, and use my link in the show notes to get 10% off, or enter the code Amy Edwards at checkout. Again, that's Wands, WAANDS.com. The Amy Edwards Show is sponsored in part by Higher Dose. Higher Dose creates wellness tech for everyone with tools, supplements, and body care. And I have 15% off for you with my code MAGIC15. Higher Dose has been featured in Goop, Glamour, Elle, Vogue, Bazaar, Allure, and more. I have their infrared pulsed electromagnetic field, or PEMF mat, which emits electromagnetic waves that mimic natural frequencies found in nature, stimulating and encouraging your body's natural recovery process. It also has 20 pounds of crystals in it and has shown to ease chronic pain, aid in exercise recovery and circulation, deepen your meditations, reduce stress, and improve total body relaxation. I also love their red light face mask. It stimulates collagen, reduces fine lines, regenerates cells, and it's soft and easy to use and store and even travel with. I'm a true fan of these items and more, like their glow serum. So I'm excited to offer you 15% off using my code MAGIC15. Go to the show notes. You can click through on the link right there. Or if you go to Higher Dose, just enter the code MAGIC15 for 15% off. HigherDose.com. This podcast is sponsored by The Collective ATX. If you're looking for the best in hair extensions, it's The Collective ATX. They do mine, and I won't go anywhere else. I've tried them all over the years, and finally, I've found what makes my real hair stronger and fuller, and even works with my natural curl. They keep all their extensions in-house, so there's no wait, and they specialize in no damage to your natural hair like traditional hair extension methods. Plus, they're pros at color and covering gray. I have literally never in my life been happier with my color. They were named a top 200 salon by Salon Today in 2023. They've changed my hair journey. Let them change yours. The Collective ATX, link is in the show notes. What about like calling yourself something before you actually have done it? Like say you haven't written a book, but you say, well, I am an author, and then that feels real weird. Or you haven't spoken, but you say I'm a keynote speaker or something like that.
Well, the thing is, if you've ever written an email or a text message, you are not. If you've ever written a paper, if you've ever written a paper in school, you are an author. If you have ever spoken out loud in front of another human being, you are a public speaker.
There you go.
Even if it is to an audience of one, right? And so, yes, I believe fully in stepping into the role even before it feels comfortable.
But we can find examples where you've already been doing it. If you're going to be really honest, like with yourself, maybe you haven't done it in front of, an arena, but like that. Yeah.
But you're still a speaker. Maybe you just say, I'm a public speaker, not a professional speaker, until you get your first paid gig. And then you change the language because now you are a professional being paid for this, right? So there's a lot of ways that you can. Language is so important.
Agreed. Big proponent of using proper language, as I can't get that word out, but yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it frames our experience, right? It's powerful. That's why when someone says, we did this exercise the other day. I'm in this space leadership program where I'm a group lead. I've done it. I've done the program myself, and now I'm one of the group leads. And this is my third time being a TA for. It's called Space Kind. And we wrote our own obituaries on Wednesday night. So the exercise is you have died suddenly. Like that's it. Today it's done. What would your obituary say? How would your life be looked at? Not just by others, but like you. What is something missing? Do you have regrets? All of that. And it was one of the first times that I actually really leaned into this exercise and realized, wow, actually, if Wednesday night had been my last night, I had one regret. And that was just that I didn't open up my heart to love sooner and to the being open to having a family of my own sooner. But other than that, everything else that 6 months ago was a regret when I did the exercise, I'd already started to shift. And so that was actually I didn't realize that until I did the exercise. And I was like, wow, that's actually pretty cool. But one of the girls in my group, she said, oh, I could never be as eloquent as Sarah and Rhett. And I was like,
not with that attitude. That's what
I said, firstly, never say never. Right. Secondly, you're not as eloquent yet. And you don't need to be as eloquent as Sarah or Rhett because you are going to be as eloquent as you. You will not sound like me and you will not sound like this other person. You want to sound like you. And we had a conversation around that. And she was like, I'm not heard the not yet thing before. And just adding those two words at the end of your sentence is so powerful.
Agreed. Great tool. Great recommendation. Yes.
Because I will cry when I get frustrated. And I used to get so frustrated that it would like get me worked up. And now I just add not yet, and I take a deep breath, and I'm like, okay, it's okay. I'm allowed to suck at something. That's my like recovering people pleaser perfectionist. I'm
Yeah.
allowed to be bad at this until I'm good.
I mean, I frankly think it would be real weird if you were good at it right off every single thing right off the bat. It's like,
Heck,
hasn't anybody watched like the first episode of literally like any show and the pilot is shit, and you're like, this is the best show ever. It's like fucking groundbreaking. And then you're like, oh yeah, it sucked too. I mean, it's just that's how it goes. And like we forget that and just want to jump to the end. And that's not at all how it works. But I think that when you mentioned that, adding like, oh, I'm not blah blah yet or not yet, that's part of that nuance that you mentioned. I think that that seems like a nuanced pivot. Would you say yes to that as one of the nuance?
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you're leaving the door open for that possibility to be there rather than shutting it yourself, right? Because if you have the mindset of you're not creative or you're not something, you will find confirmation bias. You are going to find reasons to support that belief, right? When you say not yet, then that allows for you to do it and not be good at it and be like, that's okay. I go back and I watch my like earlier podcasts and my interviews and I'm like, oh my God.
Don't do that.
What?
Just don't even do it. Watch the most recent.
What was I even doing? But at that time, that was, my skill set and that was my capability. And I didn't care. I just did it anyways. It was fun. And I have improved greatly since then. I mean, even from 6 months ago, there's a difference. And that's okay. Look, if you're not embarrassed by who you were 6 months ago, then what are you even doing? You're probably not You're probably just Netflixing, right? You're like hitting the yes, I'm still here button.
Yeah. One of the first times I spoke like in person to a bigger group, and it wasn't even that big of a group. I was going to speak the next day, and the day before they were doing some breath work and stuff, and everyone was drawing a card. And I really wanted to do good. I wanted to nail it. I wanted to seem like polished and pro, and like I've been doing this for years, right? And I'm such a like affirmations girl, words, all that kind of stuff. So I'm telling myself all this stuff, and I've done radio, for like 30 years. But I'm nervous about this, and I go to draw a card. It's a deck I've never seen before, and the card I draw, no lie, because I was like focusing on like doing well tomorrow and telling them what they need to hear and blah, blah, blah. And I draw a card. It says inexperienced. And I was like, you got to be fucking kidding that this card even exists in this deck. And I just was like, you know what? That's right. I am inexperienced, and you've got to do it once to even get any experience. So go do it. But what are you even doing if you're not embarrassed what you were doing 6 months ago? That's amazing. That's amazing. That needs to be on a t-shirt. Yeah. What are some other like because you know what, initially going into this I was like, okay, yeah, pivot, that means that is transformation. But in talking to you, I don't think so. It's more of a precursor to transformation to me. I don't think maybe pivots build up. They can be transformative, but how would you distinguish between those, and what would you say to that?
Yeah, so I think there are different levels of pivots. Some are
levels.
Jumping in the fire and, you're doing a complete 180. Sometimes it's half a degree, right? It's very subtle and you don't notice even that you're pivoting or you're off course. So being an aviation background, I bring it back a lot to flying an airplane, right? If you're not on autopilot, you have to be really paying attention to your instrument panel, to your map, and not veering too far, of course, because over time, that half a degree, that 1 degree, you'll be miles off your course, right?
Absolutely. That's such a wonderful analogy in so many ways, right?
Absolutely. And sometimes the pivots, you might 359 degrees pivot to go only 1 degree off course from where you currently are. You might have to do that. And you're going to spin all the way around just to go slightly off the course that you are currently on. And other times you're going to go, oh, I can just go this way. I don't have to do all other stuff, right? But again, that's where experience comes in, and that's where perspective comes in. So I'm really big on zooming out. I think meditation is so important so you can observe your thoughts. That gives you the zoom out perspective. What does your life look like from that 30,000-foot view? Because then you can like see the pieces and you can start to notice the patterns. You see a path that you couldn't see when you're on the ground because it was over there, right? Or there's fog in the way. And just like flying an aircraft, there's an instrument panel, but if you're not rated to fly using only the instrument panel, you're not allowed to take off when there's inclement weather. Like you have to be able to see or else you can't take off. But so many of us, we learn something once or we read it in a book or, we watch it on a show and we're like, oh no, I know how to do that. But in the moment, you don't yet have the pattern recognition to like default to that thing. You're still going to do the old thing. It's a heavier lift until you actually do it a few times. So if you're shifting 1 degree, maybe it's not transformational now, not yet, but in 5 years, that 1 degree shift you've made is exponential. And you didn't do very much in that day one, and you just repeated it. You were consistent and you constantly iterated, but now you have this exponentially different person in front of you. Like if you would have met me 5 years ago, you probably wouldn't recognize me if I was walking past you on the street. And two, just my energy it would have been so different. I had a lot of tension in my body. I was trying to like portray that I was this strong, confident, capable, hyper independent woman that didn't need, you to tell me what to do. And I didn't need a man and I didn't need this. And just like, real, real strong, real fierce, but a little overly so, too much in my masculine. Other times that pivot is this 90-degree shift, 180 shift, and it's pretty rapid, it's pretty immediate, and it's transformational. And everybody kind of is like, whoa, it's like, this is wildly different than who you were a month ago. Or, it's usually that comes from a big change in the person's life, right? Maybe a health crisis or a separation or divorce or the birth of a child or a death. Those things are usually what bring about that rapid transformation with the pivot. But it can be both.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, I found it interesting when I was saying that you radiated this confidence when I saw you, and I was like, she has it together. But you mentioned taking care of yourself. And really, I thought that's it. You looked to me like somebody who really takes good care of yourself. So what role does self-care play in being a strong, being strong in your habit of pivoting, I suppose, or in staying present?
Yeah, and that's it's absolutely crucial. I mean, it was something that I neglected for many, many years in the pursuit of whatever goal I was, doing. I would, as an athlete, as a competitive athlete, I would often push my body beyond its boundaries, but to an unhealthy level, right? Because you're focused on the competition. Working in such an intense environment, you're ignoring your body signal to go to the bathroom, to drink water, to, competitive athletes, or then also it's like, I have to eat, but I'm not hungry, or I'm in a cutting phase, so I'm really hungry, but I'm not going to eat, right? Like all of these things we do to ourselves to override our body's natural wisdom using the mind. That process of reconnecting to myself and giving myself what nourished me, and not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally, like actually embracing sleeping, not thinking that it was a waste of time, like things like that, by far has been the most crucial. Because when I don't do those things, when I don't have that foundation of self-care, the slightest change to the schedule could like derail me. You know what I mean? It's all of a sudden the thing that you're normally fine with, you have a blow up about, or you throw a tantrum over, or you just like cry in the corner because the world is ending. But it's,
oh my God, I do. I'll eat anything. I can't handle life. I mean, like, it's like,
I have definitely eaten
my God, go to sleep. Yeah. Oh God, me too. But no, it really is crucial in so many ways, but handling change and pivoting, I think that's a really interesting one to point out, like that.
Yeah.
It matters so much for that too. And it comes across.
Also, because when you're taking care of yourself and you have a structure, discipline, I forget where I read this, who said it, but discipline is a form of self-love.
Yeah, it truly is. I
It
think a lot of
really,
people
really
said it. Yeah.
is. And I think from being a competitive athlete, I have that ability drilled into me from a very young age of like, if I set my mind to a goal, I'm gonna do it. I'll wake up,
Mhm.
I'll meditate, I'll do the thing. I can, go through lazy periods, of course, but when everything else around you is changing, but you have your practices, that's what's keeping you stable on the inside. And then that stability, that inner stability, is what allows the shift on the outsides to take place. And it might hurt. You might be sad. You might be angry. You might be frustrated. You might be scared, but you still know you're okay. And so
Mhm.
the ability to also handle and process your emotions is another piece that comes with the self-care. And they're really intertwined. That somatic regulation experience is really, really powerful.
You just phrased that so well. I mean, I think that is exactly it, right? I got me, and the hurricane can be going on around me, but I'm calm, I'm okay. That's that knowing that I think just shows.
Mm.
And, you can be at a crazy party or whatever, like we were at. And I was like, she's got her shit together, and it just like, there it is. And so that's a really beautiful thing to witness. And that's the thing that so many times we see in other people and envy, or be like, I want that. And it's so simple. And yet we make it so difficult so many times.
Yes. Yeah. Because we're told it's difficult. We're told we can't do these things, right?
Yeah.
And it can be difficult sometimes to stick to something that is good for you, but you don't wanna, your motivation is down. Like this morning, I was like doing one of these, like, oh, maybe I'm gonna, no, okay, we're gonna meditate, like maybe
Mhm.
I'm just gonna lay back down for 5 minutes. And I had a little war with myself, but I got up, um, because I knew that it would change the outcome of my day. And there's the days that I let myself slip back down. Then later in the day, maybe I'm slipping down in other ways, right?
Yeah.
It's a very slippery slope because also first thing you do in the morning, like if you hit snooze, you are breaking the contract you made with yourself before you went to sleep, and you are now eroding your own self-trust. And that erodes your self-confidence more than anything else.
Yep.
So the best way to become confident is to do the things you say you're going to do. That's it.
Yeah.
Like literally that simple. And I know it sounds silly, but we always come up with justifications and excuses and reasons. And if it's not your priority anymore, great, fine, but admit that to yourself.
Mhm.
Don't have the story of, oh, but no. Either you're gonna do it because that's what you say that you really want this. But if you're just saying you want it and you're justifying, then just admit you don't want it. That's okay. Like, look, I would love to have a six pack, but I also love to eat. So like, I don't want a six pack because I don't want to have to eat that way. Right. I
Right.
want to be able to enjoy. So like a 4 pack's fine, or even a 2 pack, like it's fine. I don't need to
I
have the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But then now I'm not feeling guilty when I eat the thing. And I'm also not hating myself when I don't look this ideal that is not really in congruence with the lifestyle I want to lead.
That's right. That's really a great point about assessment of your actions and what you really want. I hadn't thought of the snooze button as breaking that contract with yourself. Because I do talk a lot about, um, you hearing your own voice
Mm.
and honoring what you say and the trust that we project. Like when we sense we can't trust somebody, that's for a reason. And what are you projecting? But I say don't hit snooze for a completely different reason because it actually makes you more tired during the day. So
Yes,
don't go back
it
to
also
sleep.
does.
Yes, yes. But I like that one too. And I got to tell Justin that one because he needs to stop hitting snooze because I think he does. I just get up. But it's training yourself though. But that's a whole nother way to look at it. And it is all these little contracts that we can keep with ourselves and it's habits. Like, what are we really showing up for in our lives?
Right. What do you want to take a stand for? And it's speaking of contracts, when I first was starting this journey and I didn't know how to, like, I would break the contract with myself all the time. Be like, oh, I'm gonna go to the gym at 1, but then a client calls or, whatever. And I
Mhm.
don't do it. So I started putting into my calendar just one hour, one time a week. That's it. That's how I had to start. I actually started with 30 minutes and then I made it an hour. And I just put meeting because I still worked in corporate
Mhm.
and no one could book a time with me. And then that way too, also, if someone called me, I was working on boundaries, even if it was my boss, Sarah, are you available for a meeting at 2? Let me check. No, I'm sorry. I have another appointment. Can you do 2:30? Yeah, great. No problem. I remember the first time that happened, I was like, what? This is possible?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I didn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
It's not a huge ordeal. Like, no, it was just saying I'm not available at this time, but here's another time I'm available. Perfect. Great. We found a time that works. And then from there I was able to build. But that's
Mhm.
the hack for the people who really struggled to give themselves self-care. Because you wouldn't not show up for that call with your boss. You wouldn't not show up for the call with your client. So if you put it into your calendar with this, like I make it red, my business category. And then that way too, my brain just sees red. So when I'm scanning, it's like, can't miss these meetings. Right.
Mhm.
And then I show up to my computer. I'm like, oh, it's my journaling time. Cool.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. That seems like it could also be a hack to pivoting into your best self or your dream self or this person that you aspire to be. I've been seeing a lot on social media where people say, I'm putting into Chat GPT, what is a day in the life of, my dream self look
Yeah.
like? And then, they're trying to operate from that place, which I am a big fan of too. I've been playing with that and I have for years, but like what is the, amazing CEO badass version of myself operate like on a day to day, because they say the way you live your days is the way you live your life. So it seems like you could use pivots to operate as your dream self. How would that look? Kind of like what we've been talking about, but what would you add?
Yeah. I just did a really powerful exercise. So I'm going to recommend this book. It's called Personal Socrates by Mark
Ooh, okay.
Champagne.
By who?
Mark Champagne, Mark on MARC. And
Champagne. Okay.
yes. And so it's questions that will upgrade your life from legends and world-class performers. And on the back, it says, at any point, we are one question away from a different life.
Mm,
And it's true. And actually, asking questions is more powerful than any answer because it's the process of finding your answer and asking yourself these questions. So the exercise that what was it the other day? I forget the name of the exercise, but what I had to do was imagine if. And so, how can I heal myself was actually the heading of this chapter. But it was, switching from I can't to how can I? And so imagine if. So I just wrote a bunch of things like, imagine if I was not lactose intolerant. um, Imagine if I slept well every night.
mm,
Imagine I always felt calm and had stress-free interactions. Imagine I was always fully present to the now and co-created with synchronicity. Imagine my body always felt strong and supple. Imagine if I had a PA who traveled with me, just like
yeah.
all of those things. And so you go down this list. It's kind of like the opposite of your catastrophizing. Oh my God, what if this happens? So it's the imagine if prompt allows you to be, because when we imagine, it's usually positive, it's creative, it's,
Mhm.
we're going into this like fantasy, if you will, right? It's not this,
Yeah.
my God, what, like literally financial models are like, what if scenarios? What if it's 70%? What if it's 80%? Right? That's the negative side. So we flip the script. And you know what I have to say, when I was doing that exercise and even just reading that out loud right now, like my body feels different.
Yes.
Actually feel
Yes.
more expansive. I feel more relaxed. Like I have the tingling sensation that I get when something really amazing is happening. Like I even feel like my eyes are a little bit wider and I don't know, I just feel different because I'm imagining those things. And it feels great. It feels great
It
to imagine that.
I think it's almost laughing at yourself in a whole different way. At least sometimes when I've done it too, and I could sense that with the imagine if. Like, imagine if I was like, not lactose intolerant. Like, imagine if I had someone traveling with me. Imagine if I had, all my finances completely taken care of and $2 million just to play with. And like I've done that just walking around the house sometimes, but I had a different lead in, which was like, why am I so amazing? Why do I have like gigs coming at me? Why are people like so excited? Whatever. Like, and so you end up laughing because you get so ridiculous on it, but the sky is the limit. And then you're having fun and you've completely changed your state.
Absolutely. And that's the point of it, right? It's, our because then that energy is different. It's like you go out and have interaction with someone. If you do that exercise right before you go to a party where you know nobody,
do it in the car.
You're buzzing, right? And then all of a sudden, like, people notice you and they come up and they talk to you and they all of a sudden they're like, whoa, what does this person have? Like, why are they so happy? I want to talk. Want to be around that person, right?
Why is everyone magnetized toward me? Why am I glowing? Like, imagine if I show up like with a halo around me. I don't know.
I mean, energy is so real. It is. We have the languaging for it, right? It's like, oh, it was palpable. You could cut the tension with a knife, or their laughter was infectious. The reason we have this language is because that's actually is what is happening. And you can go into a whole quantum physics conversation about it. You can go into a whole spiritual component of it. But at the end of the day, energy is real. And so if you're changing your energetic state, then like everything else shifts from there. And you're going to attract more of that towards you. You literally create your own orbit. And then the stuff that doesn't vibe with it, it's going to be repelled away like opposing magnets. It's great. It's honestly fantastic.
It is. I totally agree. All right. What have we missed talking about pivots? What do we still need to cover, or what do you want to like reiterate or expand upon before we end today?
Well, I would say, so I have this thing up on my wall and it's all about slowing down. I would say that with the pivots, you just want to make sure that you're not rushing, because we can get really excited and we can go full steam ahead, but it's really important to, be very intentional. When you are planning a pivot, you should be intentional, because when you're not, I mean, you'll just start to pay attention when you're rushing or when you're not. And usually the rushing causes more work for you later. I'll give you an example. Earlier, I was carrying my dog's water bowl and I was walking a little too quickly and the water started to slosh. And I was like, I took a breath and I just stopped. And then I walked really, really slowly and I put it down. And I thought to myself, you know what? The old you would have just kept going, trying to control the water flow and put it down, and you would have splashed half of it on the floor and had to spend more time to clean it up. And I was like, wasn't that so much more enjoyable? And it seems like such a small moment, but actually that was like pretty huge, because that's a metaphor for the way you do everything in life, right? So
I think it's really important to distinguish there too. You're not saying, you're intentional, not in, I'm going to go set this water bowl down. You're intentional in, I'm going to slow down.
Yes.
That's the intention versus I'm getting there. All right.
Right. Yeah. Like exactly. In aviation, they have something called get there-itis. And this is,
I can imagine. Right.
Yeah. Pilots get in trouble with this because it's like, I just want to get there. So they start to have shortcuts. They start like trying to cut the process down. And anytime like, literally someone asked me, they're like, how are you like hacking you look 10 years younger than you did when I met you 10 years ago. What's your hack? And I was like, you want a shortcut? I sleep now like 40% more than I did before. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, like literally I take naps. I do less things. So with frantic energy. So I'm spending more time, but that's the process. You can't bypass certain things, right? So being intentional with your process in the pivot and letting the outcome also look different than what you imagine is also part of the fun and the wonder and the like awe and joy of this human experience that we have.
Truly. Absolutely. All right. Is there anything else we need to add before we go?
Just take a deep breath and smile.
It can be as simple as that. Like, right. Take a deep breath and smile. There you go. Well, how can everyone find you and perhaps work with you or hire you to speak?
Thank you.
Mhm.
Go to sarahkalmeta.com or Google Sarah the Pivoter. I am on, my podcast is on YouTube. I'm active on LinkedIn and Instagram. You might find me on some other channels, but I don't really play as much in those areas. And yeah, just send me a message. You can email me, sarah@sarahkalmeta.com, and inquire if you have an event coming up where you're looking for an engaging host or a keynote speaker, and we'd be happy to have a chat.
That is wonderful. And all those links will be in the show notes for anybody that wants to reach out. So I hope that they will and follow you, of course, for all sorts of pivoting inspo because they they make such a difference. And thank you so much for everything that you shared today. I'm so happy we could make this happen.
Me too. And I'm looking forward to connecting again in person real
Me
soon.
too. Me too. Absolutely. We'll have to do that. And so thank you to everyone that turned up today, because even just listening, you know what, we're making miniature pivots all the time. It's a choice to listen to this podcast versus, something maybe like a book that is just fiction or something like that, right? We're making tiny little shifts that can be that, tenth of a degree that will add up as we proceed. So thank you so much for being here. I highly recommend sharing it with a friend and having conversations around it, because I think that always brings such interesting change. And you might be able to do some of those exercises that Sarah recommended and bounce things to your friend and then bounce things off you that you are able to try on for size that you didn't even realize you had in you. So thank you so much for being here. Please rate, review, follow the podcast. And of course, sharing is always appreciated. So subscribe to my newsletter, and everything else is available at amyedwards.info. And I'm just so happy that you were here today. Keep shining bright. Keep pivoting big and small. And thanks again to Sarah Kalmeta. Go check her out. So till next time. Thank you so much for being here. Please rate, review, and follow us. And we'd love to hear your feedback. Keep shining bright.